the transaction keys and accounting entries in consignment process. It's very tricky, and if you understand it, very easy to register in our mind. Okay, let's start understanding. There are some important transaction keys when it comes to consignment procurement. First, let's understand mainly there are three types of transaction keys only. Okay, there are not more, only three transaction keys. They play major role in these consignment goods movements. So first understand consignment payables KON. Okay, this KON will be triggered when we start consuming the consignment stock or issuing, I mean, taking the ownership from consignment stock to your stock. For example, you do this 201K where you issue consignment stocks to your consume, right? To your cost center. 261K you issue the stocks to your production orders, right? 411K you withdraw the ownership of the consignment stock to your stock. So when these three movement types are happening, this KON will trigger. Clear, right? When you withdraw or consume consignment material, KON will be credited, meaning there is a stock in your warehouse and you are withdraw to your stock or consuming that consignment stock. So you are withdrawing to your stock or you're consuming. What is happening? KON will be credited minus, right? It gets reduced. And later this will be debited during the consignment settlement. Why it has to be debited? You used the consignment stock. For that, a vendor has to be paid. How much you used? Let's say $1,000. And during MRKO, that $1,000 should be paid to the, I mean, settle the vendor. Clear, right? So, to repeat, KON will be triggered when we start consuming or withdrawing the ownership from consignment to your stock. So, these three movement types, KON will be credited only, meaning you are using the consignment stock, meaning your consignment stock is getting reduced, which is good in business point of view. Second is GBB VBR. First of all, why GBB and VBR? Why not just KON? Why not just like BSX? See, GBB is actually the transaction key. VBR is a modifier. Okay, keep this in mind. GBB is the actual transaction key like KON, BSX. So whenever you see GBB, just get something into your mind that this account is used to consume the consignment material to your cost center. Understood, right? Mostly this is used for your cost center. And also the same GBB VBR is used when you start for production orders, right? When you start consuming for your production orders, this GBB VBR will be used, triggered. Because there are two types of consuming. One is to your cost center and to your production order, right? So which means to your cost center there are different GL accounts, to your production order there are different GL accounts. So it's not direct approach like KON or BSX or any other transaction keys. So that's the reason, like GBB will use VBR as modifier to find the correct consumption GL account, right? GBB VBR, basically this is a offsetting entry indicating that you consumed the consignment material, which means there is a decrease in the consignment material. So for that, this GBB VBR is responsible for that offsetting entry, right? This is a debit entry which has a expense your company incurs for consuming that material, and this GBB VBR, GBB is a transaction key, and then use VBR modifier to find the correct consumption GL account. The third one is BSX. This is BSX, we use it in normal standard purchase orders also. BSX comes into picture only when our inventory is involved. Company's inventory is involved. Company inventory is involved. So in consignment procurement type, which is the scenario our inventory is involved? When I withdraw the consignment ownership to my stock, which means I am increasing my inventory while withdrawing the consignment ownership to my stock, which means the consignment stock is coming and sitting in my inventory. When I'm talking about my inventory, the whole SAP system, this is the only transaction key will be affected, BSX. Inventory posting happens in BSX. Okay. Inventory consumption happens in GBB VBR. Consignment happens in KON. So now, when I withdraw the consignment ownership to my stock got increased, right? This is where BSX comes into picture. When consignment stock is withdrawn and becomes your company's own stock, BSX will be debited. That extra of quantity, how much ever you withdrawn to your stock, it will be increased to reflect the increase in your own inventory value. This has always been the debit side, right? If you also see the logic, here is your consignment stock, KON, and if you start consuming it, this will be debited, this will be credited. And when you changing the ownership of consignment stock, again this will be debited. Because your consignment stock is decreasing, this will be credited. Okay, that's the reason KON will be credit side, this too will be in the debit side. And I would like to also make you to understand there is one more transaction key in standard purchase procurement type, not in the consignment procurement type, but it is good to know that this is also offsetting entry, WRX. You have seen WRX, right? This is also offsetting entry. Whenever you talk about offsetting entry, meaning it actually, this offsetting entry means you took the something, right? You consumed something or you took something from somewhere. For that you have to offset. You have received goods for which an invoice is expected, right? So result of WRX, what will be there? By using WRX, the GRIR account acts as a bridge. Okay. Once both goods received and invoice received are posted for the same quantity and value, the GRIR clearing account for that specific item should net to 0. This is what happens with WRX account. This will come into the picture when you do the goods received for standard purchase orders, right? That time GRIR clear account will be triggered. Now, this is not relevant for consignment because no liability is created at GR. You know, right? For consignment procurement, at the time of GR, there will be no accounting entries. So, I've given examples of understanding more of consuming consignment material to a cost center. If consignment material is consumed to a cost center, Let's take an example. Let's say you have 10 units of consignment material. Okay, 10 units of consignment material X from vendor V1. So you got a material X of 10 units from vendor V1 in your consignment stock. And the consignment info record price is $10 per unit. So 10 units, $10. It will become your, right, $100 worth. You decide to issue 2 units to your maintenance department cost center out of this 10 units. So 2 units to be consumed by this maintenance department, and it will be costed to this cost center, their cost center. So movement type, we all know, consignment material to cost center is 201K. Goods issue for cost center from consignment stock. Here, what will happen? KON, consignment payable account, accounting case. This account represents your liability to the vendor because you took 2 units from consignment. You are liable to the vendor of these 2 quantities. Since you have consumed the material, your liability to the vendor increases of 2 into 10, $20. GBB VBR. This account represents the expense of consuming the material. So this is credited, and what is the offsetting account is GBB VBR debiting account, right? So it's typically a consumption or expense GL account. Explanation like, so debit consumption account GBB VBR, credit consignment payables, right, of 20. You see, consumption account GBB VBR debit side 20, consumption payables credit side 20, which means you used consignment stock of $20, and this account is actually incurred, or this account is actually consumed, and it is a offsetting entry of this $20. If you go to another example where 261, what you do 261, you issue the consignment stock to your production order, right? So in this example, let's imagine you're assembling electronic gadgets. You have a production order to assemble 5 gizmos. Gizmo means it's a chip plate. For each gizmo, you need 1 chipset. Okay. If you see what is gizmo, so this is so gizmo 2, gizmo board. Okay. So now you have a production order from your production department to assemble 5 gizmos. Each gizmo you need 1 chipset. So you need 5 chipset, right? So material chipset is a raw material, and source is this chipset is managed as consignment stock. Okay, from vendor Electro Supplies is vendor name. Consignment info record price is $50 per chipset, and you have a production order to assemble 5 gizmos. To assemble 5 gizmos, you need 5 chipset. Each chipset in the info record price is $50. So you have production order for 5 gizmos. So you go to MyGo transaction and perform a goods issue with a 261K to issue the stocks to production order for 5 chipsets to production order. Okay, P-001. So the value is 5 into 50 into 5, $250 worth. So physical stock, what will happen to physical stock? The physical consignment stock of chipsets from vendor decreased by 5 units. So financial impact will be like debit. Your raw material consumption expense account, that is GBB VBR, will be debited. It increased. From where it got increased? It took from this consignment stock of chipset, right? So financial impact will be credited. Your consignment payable GL account determined by KON is credited by 250. This signifies that you now owe one vendor $250 for these 5 chipsets that you have consumed. Clear, right? Let's understand the last example where you are transferring the ownership consignment material to your own stock. Okay, very simple example. So you have, let's say for example, 10 units of consignment material Y in your warehouse, 10 units of Y material, which is consignment, from vendor V2. So you decide to transfer 5 out of 10 from consignment stock to your unrestricted stock. What you do, you go to 411K, where you consignment stocks to your own stock, you do the transfer posting. And what will happen here? This account represents your own inventory, BSX, right? Since you are bringing the material into your valuated stock, this account is debited. Debited means increased. From where it got increased? From consignment payables, KON. Your liability to the vendor increases because you are now taking the ownership of the material. So you have to pay to this. Your liability is increased to the vendor from KON. So which means debit inventory account BSX will be debited and consignment payable will be credited. Here we need to understand and why here there is no GBB VBR. Why here BSX has come. Always remember, GBB VBR would only come into play if you then consumed that material from your own stock. In these two cases, you are using directly from consignment stock. When you are consuming, GBB VBR accounts only will come. But here, because of this movement type, it is hitting your inventory. That's the reason BSX will come, right? So in your inventory account increased by 50 from where it got from this KON account credited. So to summarize, like at the PO creation, there will be no accounting entries for consignment procurement. At GR also no accounting entries. GI, goods issue, you can consume two types, that is consignment stock to your own stock, consignment stock to consume. And the third one is consignment stock you can also issue to production order. So this 201K, 261K is for goods issue and this is only to owner transfer. So once you used this credit right with this movement types, so time to settle the vendor. So you do with MRKO. Here your credit, okay, this KON will be debited, vendor account will be credited. Okay, it's not KOB, it's KON.